If you were asked to name the worst Major League team owners in history, who's making your list? Well, the game has certainly recorded a few reckless CEOs in the past, but one name that usually tops the list is this man known as the villain of two clubs. We're talking about none other than Jeffery Loria, and to be honest, it wouldn't come as a shock to any real MLB fan out there. In fact, saying Loria was one of the worst Major League owners in history would be a massive understatement because when it comes to catastrophic tenures, the man tends to be in a league of his own. There are owners who have significantly contributed to the downfall of their franchises, and then there's Loria, who single-handedly ruined two baseball teams. How did one man acquire two Major League teams? And most importantly, how did he manage to make a mess of both? This is the unusual story of Major League Baseball's worst owner, and you bet it's about to get ugly. Believe it or not, Loria had proven himself to be an excellent CEO and business manager outside the world of baseball, and it all started at a younger age. Jeffery Harold Loria was born in Manhattan to the family of Walter Loria and Ruth Aust on November 20, 1940. He attended Stuyvesant High School, where he chose to major in art history despite initially taking pre-med courses. After college, Loria dabbled in a handful of art-buying programs before eventually opening his own collection at the age of 24, and just like that, a giant entrepreneur was born. In the years that followed, Loria and his venture Jeffrey H. Loria & Company expanded exponentially, and before long, he became a household name in Manhattan's Upper East Side. The man specialized in 20th century masters. His collection included pieces from famous artists like Henry Moore and Picasso. Surely, the success suited him, and it even became clearer when he authored two bestsellers. But for Loria, there was one more goal he wanted to accomplish, and this one's an easy guess: owning a Major League Baseball club. Although he didn't play, Loria had loved the game from ever since he was little, attending games from a very young age. Perhaps somewhere, somehow, little Loria dreamed of owning a baseball club someday. When the chance presented itself, he was never going to say no. However, this dream was as big as a dream could get, so Loria had to start from somewhere. For him, it was the Oklahoma City 89ers, which was a AAA affiliate of the Texas Rangers. Of course, it wasn't a major league team, as he had always wanted, but it was definitely a step in the right direction. Loria bought the 89ers in 1989, which is quite poetic if you think about it. He owned the team for 4 years, during which time they won one American Association championship before he sold it in 1993. So, if this was a test drive, it had been a pretty smooth one, and now he was ready to take on more, perhaps a team from the top tier. However, his first attempt to secure one ended in a bit of disappointment when he lost the bid to purchase the Baltimore Orioles in 1994. Sadly, it hadn't gone as planned, but being a determined man and an even better entrepreneur, Loria wasn't going to let go of his dream that easily. So, in December of 1999, he purchased a 24% stake in the Montreal Expos for a whopping $12 million. It might have taken 5 years longer than initially planned, but Loria now had the thing he had been longing for. He was now the proud managing general partner of a major league franchise. Now, this would have been a massive achievement for anybody, most of all for Loria, who had long coveted this position. Well, it certainly was, but he wasn't quite done yet. He wanted to be more than just a managing partner, and he knew the opportunity would come. But even he would not have expected it to come as quickly as it did, because in less than 2 years, a series of fortunate events had seen him acquire over 90% of the team. Dreams do come true after all, and right there and then, the now 59-year-old Loria was basking in the reality of his. But then, perhaps the long wait had made him slightly desperate and a little bit cranky, and if the Expos fans had hoped for a smooth sailing with their new owner, they're about to be handed a rude awakening in what would turn out to be one of the most controversial tenures in the club's history. Now, for a man who waited so long to finally realize his goal of owning a major league team, you'd think Loria would be subtle and at least try to endear himself to the people of Montreal, right? Wrong. You see, one of his first acts as the owner of the Montreal Expos was to demand the construction of a new stadium, which sounds fair enough since the team was renting Olympic Stadium at the time. However, Loria had proposed to utilize public funding for this project, and that certainly did not sit well with the Montreal residents. Plus, in an attempt to curry favor with the already disgruntled Montreal fans, Loria embarked on a needless spending spree to secure the signatures of first baseman Lee Stevens, starting pitcher Hideki Irabu, and star reliever Graham Lloyd. Sadly though, and contrary to what he had hoped, these signings only failed to impress, and the team did not record any meaningful success on the field. It also didn't help their finances that these new signings had almost doubled the club's payroll. By now, Loria's relationship with the Expos faithful was already getting sour quickly. However, the final straw was when the club management failed to secure television and English-speaking radio coverage for the 2000 season, leaving fans with limited avenues to follow games. It was also discovered that the reason for the failed broadcast agreement was due to the club's outrageous demands for their broadcast rights. It was the last straw for fans who began to boycott games, and that automatically translated to fewer and fewer fans in the stands on game day. With average attendance dropping below 10,000, the club clearly wasn't generating nearly enough revenue. Before he knew it, the team's debts began to pile up. In just 3 years of Loria's Montreal takeover, the Expos were essentially on the brink of total collapse. He'd successfully ruined what was left of the club, and just when they thought it couldn't get any worse, well, Loria, just being Loria, found a way to make it worse. He finally sold the Expos to a partnership of the 29 other MLB owners for about $120 million, but not without taking everything he could, just like a vehicle being stripped for parts. Word on the street was that he took everything, from the computer equipment to the team staff. It was a show of shame, as Montreal fans put it, and it doesn't matter how you look at it, there was just no justification for what Jeffery Loria had done to the Montreal Expos. But there was even more to come. Shortly after his disgraceful stint in Montreal, Loria acquired the Florida Marlins for a resounding $159 million. Perhaps he was desperate to rewrite the pages of his major league ventures, which obviously weren't looking good at this point. Luckily, this time, things couldn't have gotten off to a brighter start for the villain of Montreal, as his new franchise went on a successful run to clinch the World Series in 2003. So, maybe lightning wasn't going to strike a second time, as many had feared. However, old habits die hard, as they say, and as if scripted, Loria soon started to display the exact pattern from his time with the previous enterprise. First, he demanded a new stadium financed by the public, again. Next, he went on a selling spree, shipping off key players like Luis Castillo, Josh Beckett, and Mike Lowell, among others. It was deja vu all over again, and he had gone on to pin it on the club's lack of revenue, as was typical of him. However, the entire baseball world was stunned when a shocking document, which was leaked in 2010, showed that the club had returned a profit of $33 million and generated around $92 million in revenue over the 08 and 09 seasons. These were league-leading figures, despite the fact that the club had the lowest payroll. This cunning man had fooled the mayor and the people of Florida into building him a shiny new stadium from public funds, while he siphoned the millions of profits coming into the club. He had also ensured the club's glory days were now history with his shambolic decision-making. But that was not all. You see, the Marlins would go on to have their worst ever season in 2012 when they finished bottom of their division. And as if that was not humiliating enough, any hopes left of a comeback in the following season were completely eliminated when Loria masterminded a 12-player trade to further cut down the payroll. It was simple. The fewer players he had to pay, the more money he could make. He was treating the club like a piece of his art collection that only existed to make him richer, and it was totally unacceptable. The fans had had enough of it and called for an immediate sale of the club, but their protests fell on deaf ears. Loria was as selfish as they come, and he was never going to leave until when it benefited him the most, even if it meant ruining yet another major league franchise. For the Marlins fans who watched it all unfold, they didn't know which one hurt more, the fact that they were fooled or that their beloved club had turned into a shadow of itself. The only thing they knew for sure was that Loria had struck again, and he'd ruined baseball for them as he did for the people in Montreal. It was obvious at this point that every team he touched turned to dust. Of course, Loria finally let go of the Marlins in 2017, but not after sealing his legacy as the villain of two clubs and the worst MLB team owner in the history of the game. And to this day, that's what most fans know him as.